Ah. Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar, Best Practices for Psychomotor Examination Scoring. Today's presenter is Examination Coordinator Todd Vreeland. Today's session is being recorded. We will have everyone's microphones muted. Please hold questions until the end. We ask that you submit questions through the question box. We will review and answer questions at the end of the session as time permits. We are ready to begin. Please enjoy. Todd?
Okay, thank you, Kendall. I'd like to thank everyone for taking time out of their busy day to listen to us, our presentation here today. This webinar is targeted for both the ALS and the BLS psychomotor evaluations. Although the skills that the candidates are performing may be a little bit different, the principles are of consistency and fair evaluation are the same. So what is evaluation? So it's the systematic acquisition and assessment of information. So there's two different types of evaluation, the formative and the summative. Formative is used in education of the candidates, and the summative is used for the certification and for licensure. And that's what we're going to be speaking of today. So formative, we're taking the temperature. It's the ongoing evaluations that were conducted throughout the course, and were designed to provide feedback to both the students and the instructors, which is useful for remediation and redirection of their instruction. It's question and answer periods at the conclusion of a topic of discussion. It's progress checks and quizzes, hands-on psychomotor drills, or module or section testing, and that we do along the way. Now our summative evaluation, we're doing that. We are performed at the completion of the delivery of a larger section, module, or program. It provides students with feedback relative to their mastery of the content, and it provides instructors with feedback relative to their success in the teaching strategy. This would be your course-ending examination, your hands-on practical skill evaluation, your course critiques. The NREMT, we do a high-stakes summative evaluation that in most cases leads to licensure, since since we do that, we do not give the feedback to the candidates. This is the terminal evaluation. The feedback should have been given to the candidates during their learning process. This is not an educational process. This is a verification of competency process. So there's some different type of evaluation tools, and we're going to be talking today about, about practical examinations. At the ALS level, the examination is administered by the National Registry representative for the AEMT and for the paramedic. These people have been trained by the National Registry. They utilize an examination manual, and they utilize secure examination material. They follow the policies and the procedures of the National Registry while administering the exam. At the BLS level, the examination is administered by the state EMS official or their designee. These are the EMTs and the EMRs. And they may utilize their own material and scenarios, and we urge you to check with them for the requirements of what they want you to use. So the advantages of a practical examination is we are able to evaluate psychomotor skills. We bring real life into the evaluation. It allows the evaluation to be related to behaviors and skills, and allows us to test the decision-making and leadership skills. Some disadvantages: it's hard to standardize. That's why at the National Registry we use our scenarios. That's why we use our policies and procedures. We follow those throughout one side of the country to the next. We're doing it the same way. It's time-consuming to prepare and administer these exams. It's labor-intensive, and we're limited by how many students you can get through the pipeline in one day. So these are some of the limitations and some of the ways we've come to overcome them. So when we're going to have a psychomotor examination, we first need a physician medical director. He's the overall making sure of what the program has delivered to the students, so he needs to be involved in their summative evaluation. Then we have EMT assistants. These EMT assistants need to be licensed as EMTs at a minimum. They need to be a trained partner for all the testing candidates. They can't be related to or have a bias towards any of the candidates. They need to follow the directions of the candidates and not try to trick the candidate. This is a high-stake examination, and the candidates don't need any extra obstacles thrown in front of them. If the candidate instructs the EMT assistant to hold C-spinal mobilization, the EMT assistant will properly hold the C-spinal mobilization. They don't, periodically move their hands or whatever like that. We're not here to throw any tricks towards these candidates. These candidates just need a fair evaluation. They're under enough pressure and they're nervous enough they'll throw their own obstacles up in front of themselves. We do not want to do anything like that. Next, we need to have the simulated patients. The simulated patients should be someone who's familiar with EMS, something involved in EMS. EMR or higher we recommend. They have an idea of the skills that the candidates are performing so that they are able to help the evaluator at the end of the performance with the evaluation. The evaluator can ask them questions. When he log rolled you, did your neck move? And that's a very good way to get feedback to provide for these evaluations. These people that we're using, we want to make sure they're of average height and weight and at least 16 years old. Again, I can't emphasize it enough. This is a very high-stakes environment. We need people that are mature enough, and they're not going to be goofing around while the evaluation is going on. We also want average height and weight. You don't want to get some 17, 18-year-old person who is skinny as a rail, and you go to put them in a KED, and the KED literally does not fit them because they're too small for it. You want someone that's of average height and weight. The simulated patients need to be pre-programmed, utilizing the scenarios provided by either the state official at the BLS level or the one at the National Registry rep at the ALS level. The scenarios need to be as realistic as possible. The more realistic, the fairer the evaluation. If the candidate is supposed to withdraw from pain or have sonorous respirations or monium palpation, when the candidate touches that area or goes to examine that area, the simulated patient needs to do that like a real patient would do. Again, realism is the key word here, and the more realistic, the more fair the evaluation is. The moulage, we want to try to make them as realistic as possible. Again, we want to make it as lifelike for the candidate because that makes it as fair as possible. Now we've got our candidate, or excuse me, we've got our simulated patient who's all dressed up and all ready to go, is all moulaged on, has its scrubs on that have been cut up and then taped back over so that he can be evaluated. What do we do with this person? Well, we need to avoid exposure for this person. Number one, to the environment. They're wearing cutaway clothing. They're laying on the floor. You need to get these people a blanket to lay on. And also we want to avoid exposure to the candidates. When these people have to go and take a break, we want to wrap them up so they can go to the bathroom so they don't walking the halls with all the wounds on them and people have an exposure. They already know what they're going to be getting. And also, if we do have a large number of candidates, you want to be aware that this does fatigue the simulated patients, and you might want to have extra simulated patients if you're running an extra large exam. We do allow for the use of high-fidelity mannequins in lieu of a patient, as long as they're able to be programmed as a patient would respond. And if you are going to use high-fidelity mannequins, it's usually a good idea to have the candidates familiar with the high-fidelity mannequins. If this is the first time I'm ever seeing a high-fidelity mannequin, and it's my summative evaluation, that's really, really going to add to my anxiety. So if you can use, in the training, have them work with these mannequins, have them work with scenarios, and of course they're not going to be the same as the summative one, but at least they're familiar with working with a mannequin. And then our examiners. Who do we want to get as examiners for this evaluation? Well, you want to recruit these people from your local EMS community. They need to be licensed or certified at or higher than the level that they're evaluating. You want people that are of high moral fiber, that you have good character. You know, you don't want to be grabbing people that, you know, that has a questionable history or background. You want someone to say, oh, okay, yeah, I know that person. They're a good paramedic. They're a good EMT. They're a good EMR, and they did your evaluation. Okay, well, they must have been fair. You know, you want to add that face validity to it. You want them to be currently certified or licensed to perform the skill which they're going to be evaluated. We want to get to make sure that we avoid any conflicts of interest. If one squad has a problem with the other squad, and you got like a little feud going back and forth, you might want to avoid having those people evaluating each other. Again, we want to add face validity to this. We don't want to have any thoughts of any impropriety. If I'm the primary instructor of a program, I can't evaluate my own students. It's not fair to them. It's not fair to me. If I taught a class and I know that you know this skill, and so I'm doing your evaluation and you missed the skill, well, why did you miss it? I know you missed it. I know I taught that to you, and I might be a little bit harder on you. The opposite of that, too, is I know you know this skill. I've seen you do this skill. You've demonstrated it to me numerous times. Well, you forgot to do it this time. Well, I'll give you a break on it this time. So in order to alleviate any thoughts of that happening, we don't want any primary instructors to be involved with evaluating their own students. If, say, though, you taught PHTLS, it'd be perfectly fine for you to do an evaluation of a cardiac station, because you weren't involved in the direct education of the student over that content area, so there's less chance that you're going to have a bias going into it. And while we're doing our evaluations, the evaluators need to remember that there's more than one acceptable way to perform the skill. The big thing we want to look at is we want to make sure we meet the objective of the skill. And we just want to make sure that the candidate does this in a safe way and it doesn't have the potential to further injure the patient. And one of the things I would suggest, too, is about a week prior to the examination, all your evaluators should get a copy of sample essays and the evaluation forms to look at, so they can review these things, they become familiar with them. And the more familiar you are with this, the easier it is to do the evaluation, the better able you are to concentrate on what the candidates are actually doing, and the less time you spend looking for, oh, did I check this box, did I check that box? It flows a lot better for the candidate. And then, again, that's what we're looking to do. We're looking to look at what the candidate is doing. So now we've got all our people set up. We need to have our equipment and our facilities. We want to make sure that we have an area that's big enough. We want to limit the noise and the distraction for the candidates. We want to have a staging area where the candidates can go, and a central area where they're collected, and when they're sent out to the different areas that they're testing at. We want to have signage up so they know, not only do they know to go to room 101, but there's a big sign on the door of room 101, spinal immobilization supine. They know that that's the station they're supposed to go to. And the other thing is the pass cards. All these things kind of work together. Pass cards, they work well. They help manage the flow of the patient. I come to the person who's sending everyone out, and they give me a card. It tells me to go to spinal immobilization supine, and it might have the room number written on there. So then I go walking down the hall. I find that door. I find that the sign. I know I'm in the right place. After I'm done with my evaluation, I take that card back and I give it back to the person who sent everyone out. They cross my name out for that skill. They know I've taken it, and then they know that it's open now. They can send another person to that skill. Something that we've seen that's been done that we really don't recommend, though, is on-deck staging, where you'll actually have one candidate in the room and then another candidate waiting outside at the door, so that when one candidate finishes, the next one goes in. There's some negative aspects of that. One of them is as the evaluator, when we're going to talk about this in a moment, you need time to go down through the form and make sure that you've properly documented everything, that if there are any things that you need to clarify, that you've flipped over the form, you've objectively documented what you found. So that can take a moment or two, and usually the time it takes the candidate to walk back to the staging area and switch out another candidate is usually enough time for you. But if I've got someone sitting at the door, they're ready to pop in once the other guy walks out the door, and usually that's what they're going to do. The other down part side to this also is I got a guy sitting at the door. No matter how hard you try to make that door soundproof, you know some of that evaluation probably is going to get through, and now the candidate at the door has some unfair advantage possibly, or he might have gotten some bad information from the candidate that was in before him, and now he's got another unfair advantage. Unfortunately, this isn't to the good side. So we really don't recommend that you do that on deck staging. So now I've got everything all set up. I'm going to go around as the rep who's administering, whether it be the National Registry rep for the ALS exam or it be the state official for the BLS exam. I'm going to go around to all the skill stations and I'm going to check out the setup. I'm going to make sure that there's enough room for the candidate. I'm going to make sure that for the candidate, for the simulated patient, and the examiner to move around. I want to make sure it's quiet. There's limited crosstalk. I don't hear what the other people are doing. If I have a candidate, a skill where I'm doing anything with a BVM or someone who's in cardiac arrest, the patient needs to be on the floor. A lot of times you'll walk into a room and you'll see the mannequin sitting on the table. How many times do you walk into someone's house and find them in cardiac arrest or need them to be ventilated and they're laying on a table for you? Most of the time, vast majority of the time, they're on the floor, and so we need to evaluate this skill as it's performed in the field. The equipment, all the equipment, for each skill station there's an equipment list. So we need to make sure that all the equipment that's relevant to that skill is in the evaluation area. Some of the equipment lists are made up for multiple scenarios, multiple skills. For the ventilatory management, there's stuff for paramedics and I-99s to do intubation. So you'll have laryngoscopes and ET tubes along with bag valve mask and along with the supraglottic airways devices. You don't, if you're just running a station that's evaluating supraglottic airway device, you don't need to have the intubation equipment and supplies there because they're not needed for the candidate. You need to have everything that's needed for the candidate. Going further down that list, though, you're going to see that you need to have some basic oxygen supplies also. You need to have nasal cannulas, non-rebreathers, and you need to, but those equipment that you do need to make sure is there. Also, if we're going to do multiple stations of the same skill at a large exam, you need to make sure that all the equipment is the same. We don't want to have, you know, candidate A goes to station 1 and it has all the new equipment, and candidate B goes to station 2 and it has the older stuff, and not all, and some of it's missing, some of it's falling apart. And now, does candidate A have an advantage over candidate B because he was presented with better equipment? You want to have the same equipment at each of the stations, so no matter where the candidate goes, which station the candidate goes to, they're getting the same evaluation, and they're not being biased by the equipment not being up to par. Excuse me. With the equipment also, we don't want to pre-stage equipment, and what I mean by that is, I'm at the spinal mobilization supine, and I've got my candidate, and I'm the second candidate to go through. So I walk into the room, and there's a backboard leaning up against the wall that already has the clips in place. So, I know where the clips need to go, and look at the adjustable cervical collar, and it's already clipped into place, and it fits perfectly on the simulated patient. So now I don't need to fix that. I mean, that's already adjusted. I've got, you know, two things to my favor, or the opposite could be true too. The guy in front of me put the clips in the wrong spot and adjusted the collar the wrong way and didn't flip the chin piece up. Now I'm at a disadvantage because if I'm going to grab it and just use it as the person before me used it, it's not going to be a fair assessment. You need to put these things together at the end of the evaluation the way you would find them coming out of the packaging. Take the collar, if it is an adjustable one, undo all the things and adjust it down to however it would come out of the package. If there's a chin piece that needs to be flipped over, flip it back. The backboard, The head block, if it does have the big head pad on it, which a lot of places use for testing, they don't use them that much in the field anymore because of bloodborne pathogen concerns, but for testing they have the big orange pads on there and then the ones that go alongside their head. That pad only goes one place on that backboard, so leaving that pad on there is okay. But the backboard straps, I would remove them because there's multiple places that you could hook them on to the board and multiple configurations, and you don't want to bias the candidate by what you've chose to, or the person before has chose as their configuration. So take them off, clip them together, roll them up, and just set them along the side of the backboard. So now when the candidate comes in and they want to check their equipment out and look at their equipment, if they want to put it on the backboard, that's fine. They've put it in a place that they've selected to put it. It wasn't someone else putting it there for them. We also want to check the moulage of the patients. Again, the more realistic, the fairer it is to the evaluation of the candidate. So I've gone through, done my little walk around. Everything's all set up. It's all ready to go. So now we're going to do our orientation. We're going to do the orientation for the examiners and the candidates. We want to do this for both because it sets the expectations for all that are involved, and it outlines the policies and procedures that be followed during the examination. The examiners, we want to emphasize to them that we want to have a fair and objective recordings and observations. You are not passing or failing the candidate as an evaluator. You are fairly and objectively documenting their performance. You're writing down and documenting what you saw them do. They're the ones that pass or fail themselves. And also, while we're here too, make sure that no electronic devices are used while the candidates are in the room. It's not fair to it's not fair to the candidate that if you're in there, you're the evaluator, you're paying perfect attention. You're person that you have an extra helper in the room and they're on their cell phone texting someone. You know that they're not involved in this evaluation, but the candidate doesn't know. Everyone that's in that room has to be on task. There's nothing, no one in that room can be off task. The only exception there is for using, say, a cell phone is that if you're using it as a timepiece and you're using it as a clock. And with using it that way, I always show the candidate, I don't have a watch, I'm using this, and show them your cell phone as a timepiece and have it on the clock function so they can see what you're using it for. If you do need to take a call, wait till the candidate's out of the room, excuse yourself, and take the call then. Remember, this is a formal verification procedure. It's not designed for teaching, coaching, or remedial training, excuse me. So you can't give the candidates any indication of how they performed. And if you have a question about their performance, you don't discuss it with anyone other than the state EMS official or the National Registry rep, depending on the level of the exam, with anyone outside that room. If you have a question about whether a candidate did something or not, you can ask your simulated patient. You can ask your EMT assistant. But as far as going outside that room and talking to anyone else about it, that's a big no-no. Just the person who is administering the exam. We need to make sure that everyone behaves in a professional manner. We don't want to discriminate or harass these candidates. Again, like I said, they're under a lot of stress, so we don't need to be adding to it. Now, while they're doing their evaluation, the candidates, you're going to need to develop a dialogue with them. But you only want to ask them questions for clarification purposes. So you want to ask non-leading questions. Say the candidate says, I would apply oxygen. You may ask them, well, how would you do that? Or if a candidate asks what the patient's vital signs are, you should ask for clarification, such as what vital signs would you like? You don't just volunteer the blood pressure, the pulse, the respiratory rate, and SpO2 until they specifically ask for that. And also you want them to demonstrate that they're, put the cuff on the person, blow it up, minute in, check their vitals, take a pulse. You actually want to see them demonstrate that they know how to do those skills also. But that being said, too, we don't want to ask for additional information that's beyond the scope of the skill. Say someone we're putting them on oxygen. We don't need to be asking the candidate what the FiO2 of that delivery device is. We don't need to be asking them contraindication. Those are all knowledge-type questions, and that comes along with the cognitive examination. Unless it's specifically laid out in the scenario Don't ask questions like that. And also in the orientation, we're going to review the documentation procedures. We'll go over how that needs to be done, and we'll cover that in a moment here. And the final thing is we instruct them to read the essay and the instructions, so we ensure the skill is set up properly and the assistants patients are properly prepped. When I do an orientation to the examiners, to the candidates, I pick up my script out of my book, and literally it is a script. I read it to everyone, so everyone that across the country receives the same orientation when they're doing an advanced level examination. And for your state, suggestion is that if they have a script, you read that script too. It's fair for the candidate. You don't add any of your personal bias into the evaluation, into the instructions. It's laid out. Everyone understands the ground rules from the get-go. So once we've done that, we turn them loose, and as the coordinator or the rep, I like to walk through after both orientations are due and look to see if there's any questions that they may have, either the evaluator, the EMT, or the simulated patients may have about the scenario or the equipment. So they're going to go and check it, and I'm just going to do a quick walkthrough. Any questions? No questions. I keep moving on. And then once I've gone through all the stations, made sure all questions are answered, we start opening up skills and we start running the examination. So now during the exam is up and running. Everyone's been oriented, all our stuff's in place. We're not done yet. We need to now is when the meat and potatoes of the exam gets going. We need to visit each skill prior to the collection of the completed evaluation forms. So as the rep, we're going to sit in the room. We're going to listen to what the evaluator's asking and how the evaluator's performing the evaluation of the candidate. We want to make sure that the examiner is being objective. We want to check and make sure the documentation is being objective. If an examiner writes something on the form, it needs to be an objective statement. You can't put down, your feelings or your thought. I don't think that this guy is ready. I don't feel that this person is. Those are very subjective statements. We need to have just an objective documentation of what the candidate said or did is what you need to be putting on those forms. The rep needs to critically review all the forms that have been completed up to this point and make sure all the comments written by the examiner support the points that were awarded or deducted. If you say that the candidate did something, you want to make sure that what's written on the back and what's on the front coincide. You don't want to have any differences there, and make sure there's no areas of confusion or contradiction. And so if there are any errors that you find, and a lot of times you will find errors, you want to make sure that the evaluator has corrected the errors. You want to make sure the evaluator understands why it was an error and make sure that they don't continue to do it as the exam goes forward. And as the rep or as the state official that's administering the exam, the main purpose there is to ensure that all the skill stations are being conducted in accordance with the policies and procedures of the body that's administering the exam. And it's not to make sure that everything gets scored and offered same-day retesting. You want to make sure the candidates get a fair evaluation. That is the priority. So if stuff's not going right with evaluations, it might be halfway through the day before scoring starts. But that's what it needs to be, because we need to make sure those evaluations are being done correctly for those candidates to get a fair evaluation of what they did. So here is a sample evaluation form. This is the spinal immobilization supine patient. When we are using this form, you want to make sure that anytime there is a blank, you need to fill that out. Examiners need to fill out, they need to sign, you need to date. Anywhere there's a place for you to fill in information, you need to fill in information if there's a reason for it. When we do times, we're doing actual start and end time. We're not doing elapsed time. Number one, it's what the directions say. And if you can't follow that direction and you need to defend your evaluation, well, you didn't follow this direction, is to put start and end time. What other directions didn't you follow if you did need to defend your evaluation of a candidate. Also, it helps if something does happen down the road and the person that's running the exam needs to go back and figure out, well, what other people do, evaluation forms do I need to look at? I can sequentially put these in order based on start and end time. So again, this form, if you look at it, it's a linear form. Starts at the top, ends in the bottom. Okay, so the form is linear. The examination itself is not necessarily a linear form. So remember, we're looking at the objective of the skill, and in this case it's spinal immobilization supine, and that objective is to immediately protect and immobilize the spine using a long backboard. So as long as you achieve that objective in a timely manner and you don't violate any of the critical criterion here down at the bottom, and you do it in do it in a timely manner within any time constraints that are set, it's a fair. You need to evaluate it that way, and you don't need to let your personal bias in the way that you were taught to put someone on the backboard or the way that you put someone on the backboard. Did it meet the objectives? So going to this one, the spinal immobilization also, we're going to use the EMT assistant is going to be the one who's holding the head of the patient and spine, and then you're going to be using the evaluator and the candidate, the examiner and the candidate to move the patient. And also remember with this one too that if we're going to properly immobilize someone to the backboard, we need to make sure that we've immobilized their their upper legs, which fully immobilizes the pelvis, because if the pelvis is able to move, the spine is able to move. So we need to make sure that we fully met the objective of the scenario while we're evaluating. So if there's time limits, we're going to observe and we're going to enforce the time limit. Say that the candidate is in the middle of a step when their time has run out. You need to let them complete that step and tell them that, okay, your time is up, and then put zeros in for everything else that they did not do. So as we go down, we're going to put our points over here, and we put points. It's kind of hard with the highlighter to write points, but we don't do one big line. We don't do checks. If there's a 1 there and they got a 1, you put a 1. If there's a 0, give them the 0. Just follow the directions, and at the end you're going to total it up and put the total points that the candidate received. Then put your end time and go review your critical criteria. You want to make sure that if I check a critical criterion, I need to flip the page over and I need to document objectively what happened. You just don't want to repeat what the critical criterion says on the front. You want to write on the back what did what the candidate did for you to check that critical criterion box. Now, this is some of these statements, especially the one here down here, failure to maintain the patient as a competent EMT. What does that mean? That is a subjective statement, but what you need to do is when you flip that piece of paper over, you need to objectively write down what the candidate did to make you check that. Can't be vague. So at me as the exam rep, I come over, I flip that piece of paper over, I read your statement, and when I read your statement, I have a picture in my mind of what the candidate did, and that's how we maintain that it's make sure it's a good test to make sure it's an objective statement. And while we're doing all this, the candidate has left the room. We can ask our simulated patient and our EMT assistant if they have any input for their observations. And at no time at all, if anyone does anything that's dangerous or inappropriate that could cause harm to either one of the patient, you, the candidate, you check that and you stop the evaluation. We don't want anyone getting hurt while they're doing these evaluations and these skill stations. Now, from time to time during the examination, examiners will have questions. And they have questions, how to score an evaluation, how should I do this? The best thing for them to do is flip over that paper, document on the back of the form what the candidate did, don't sign anything. Don't turn the paperwork in. Contact either the state EMS official or the National Registry rep before you finalize that form. Once they get there, or while you're waiting for them to get there, a lot of the answers to examiner questions can be found by reviewing the essay. So my first thing I will do when I get there as the rep is I'll grab the essay and we'll read through the essay, and once you've told me what your question is, and see if it's addressed in there. And most of the answers are found in there. I mean, we have many years of administering these type of exams, and so a lot of the questions that have come up have been purposely put into the essay so that you have what you need on hand. Also, I recommend that you bring along a copy of the current AHA guidelines. Currently, we're using 2010 guidelines, and many people think they know what the guidelines are, and then when you look at the guidelines, they might not have really known what the guidelines were. So I always keep a copy of that on hand with me to pull out at a moment's notice. Actually, it's back in the room where I do the scoring, but I have it with me at the site. And if between the two things you can't answer the question by reviewing the essay or looking at the guidelines, you can always use your Quality Assurance Committee, not only for if a candidate has a complaint, but you also can use it to answer questions. So you can convene your committee and you can get guidance, and in the committee is your physician medical director, the rep or the state official, and the examination coordinator. The three of you get to either get together in person, or if the medical director is only available by phone, you can do a conference call with the medical director, outline what the problem is, and come to a conclusion. Document your conclusion, why you came to the conclusion, and then move forward from that point on. If you're doing the advanced level, the ALS exam, you also have the option to phone a friend. When we send out the examination material, Rob, Lisa, and my phone number are included with that information to the reps. And for the BLS, we suggest you check with your state office about that before you administer one of their exams and see what their procedure is. If they have a friend you can phone if you come up with questions you need answers. While if the rep or the state official can't get to you right away, and it's possible, try to keep evaluating other candidates till the rep gets there to answer your questions. That way we can keep things moving along with the examination. So security. We never want to leave our scenarios unattended. You want to cover your simulated patient as a candidate enters the examination area, and when they're outside the testing area. You don't want your candidate walking into the room and, oh, there's the guy with the flailed chest. No, have them behind a screen, covered up with a blanket, whatever, and then after you've read all the instructions to them and they're ready to proceed, then you uncover, you expose your simulated patient, and they're ready to go. No photographs or recording of any examination material or moulage patients. At the ALS level, all this material is the copyright protected material of the National Registry, and we do not allow anyone to photograph or reproduce this information. At the BLS level, the states may have protected their material. We urge you to contact your state office and ask them about their security requirements. But remember the importance of a consistent and fair evaluation to the candidates. Remember, this is most often going to lead to licensure, so we need to make sure that we do this fairly and consistently. All participants need to behave professionally. We need to objectively document what the candidates did. If we're documenting a critical criterion, make sure you paint a picture so that when I flip that piece of paper over, I can see in my mind's eye what the candidate did. You need to be fair, consistent in your evaluations. And remember that there's more than one acceptable way to perform a skill. It just needs to meet that objective, and it needs to be done safely without further chance of further injury or injury to anyone involved. Any questions? Kendall has been, are you there, Kendall?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Have you received any questions?
We do have a few.
Okay.
Let's see. Someone did want to know if this was going to be available to watch at a later time.
Yes, it's being recorded, and it is available, will be available and posted on our website.
Okay. And the next question, does the patient then play a role in determining pass-fail? That was more at the beginning of the presentation.
Right. Yeah, pass-fail. The pass-fail criterion has on the ALS examinations, the pass-fail criterion is set by the National Registry. We bring committees in, we set this criterion. No one at the examination site is involved with determining what the pass-fail criterion is. The simulated patient, the EMT assistant, the evaluator are not involved in setting pass-fail criterion. That's already been set as far as policy. You would have to check with the state offices as far as for the BLS examinations, what their policy is.
Someone, excuse me, someone did ask, what does it mean when the forms say exhibits unacceptable effect with patient or other personnel?
Okay, that's another one of those.
And someone else did say, would you give an example of unacceptable?
Unacceptable behavior. Okay, you yell at your partner. Unacceptable affect. You're yelling at your partner. You're yelling at the patient. Things you start to you make a mistake and you start yelling at people. Foul language, cursing. Those are all unacceptable affect. It's the behavior you're looking at.
And someone did ask what age necessary to take the National Registry exam.
The age necessary to take the National Registry examination is 18 years old.
Okay, and
for the EMT, paramedic, and AEMT. 16.
And someone did ask what is the minimum amount of points needed to pass.
That is another policy, but at the advanced level, for the ALS, for the EMT, for the AEMT, and for the paramedic, those are not divulged to the public. The only person there that knows is the rep who is actually doing the grading of the skills. Yep. And that helps to make sure that the evaluator is blinded to what that is. We don't want the evaluator to know what it is. We want them to be able to give a fair evaluation. Just document what the candidate did. Don't worry about whether the person's going to pass or the person's going to fail. Again, you're just there to be a objective observer and documenter of what the candidate did and said.
Okay. Next question is, what policy does the National Registry have regarding having multiple evaluations occurring in a single room?
Sometimes you do need to have, depending on the layout of the facilities that are available, you do need to have multiple evaluations run in the same room. What you need to do is try to divide it off as much as possible so that you create little pockets for the people to do their, if you can string a line up and hang sheets up, or I've seen that done. I've seen people using the display boards that you would use for like a science fair project, putting them up and putting them around on a table around where a candidate and an evaluator sit to do an oral station, or do the cardiac stations where they're doing the static cardiology, so that speak in low tones when you're speaking to the candidate. You want to make sure the candidate can hear you, but you don't want to be excessively loud. So it is possible, but as a rule, you want to try to have 100 square feet for each scenario set up so you have room to move around.
Okay. In Pennsylvania, the age to take EMT exams is 16. Will the NREMT honor this?
That is, in Pennsylvania, it is 16 for an EMT to take the state EMT exam. In order to take the National Registry examination at the EMT level for certification, you have to be 18 years old. Pennsylvania, you are allowed to take for assessment. There's an assessment exam that does not lead to certification, but the state can ask that you take an assessment exam, and the state can determine whether they want to use that result to allow you to be licensed in that state. So you would be able to, if the state says, yes, I want this 16-year-old to take an assessment examination for EMT, and then receiving a passing score on that, the state wants to license the person, that is up to the state. The state can do that, and we will administer that examination. But we will not certify that person.
Okay. Do you allow an examinee to enter the test station with note paper to take pertinent notes during the exam?
We allow them to take notes during the skill station if they would like to. I suggest that you provide you provide that paper for them. You have scrap paper at the station, like the oral station where they like to take a lot of notes. Have scrap paper, have a pencil there ready for them so they can use it and they can take their notes. And then at the end of the evaluation, all that gets turned back over and that gets destroyed. You don't let the candidate walk out with it. So I would suggest having paper on hand in the room and a pencil or a pen for writing with, and then when the candidate leaves all that behind and that gets destroyed.
Okay. On the secondary assessment for the medical assessment, does the candidate have to ask 5 additional questions pertaining to different body systems, or does there have to be a question about each system?
It needs to be, we're looking for the patient to adequately ask questions about the body system that's involved. If they've achieved that goal, then they would receive the full points. So, and they're not looking for them to assess, if it's, I hurt my big toe, I'm going to ask you questions about why is your, or I have gout pain on my big toe. I want pertinent questions about that pain in your toe. I don't, need to go into evaluating everything else, evaluating your reproductive status, for instance. No, it's on that, what needs to be evaluated in that secondary assessment.
What is a generally accepted level of experience at the EMT level for a station evaluator?
That is something that you need to discuss. I mean, there's no set number of amount of time on the street, amount of experience that they've had, maturity. You want to look at that as a global thing. You want to look overall. I would suggest anyone that you have that you were kind of iffy about, speak with your medical director and see what they think. Speak to the state official that's going to be administering the exam if you're the the person trying to recruit people for this, and see what their feelings are on this person. The states may have regulations as to age, experience, how much time on the street they have. So I would definitely contact the state office and make sure you meet all their objectives too of what all their requirements for these people to be used as evaluators.
Okay. This is a follow-up to allowing an examinee to enter the test station with note paper. The notes would be used to give their report only.
Well, they could be used to give their report only. It could be used for them to keep track of what they've done. If we don't put any, you come in with a blank piece of paper and you put whatever you need to help you get through the call on that blank piece of paper. That's you've produced it. So, and if it helps you to get to the end point of of treating this patient, that's fine.
For static cardiology, is it still true that if you miss one rhythm, you fail the entire station?
No. No, you would need to they need to, let's see, they're not going to fail. They need to, it's based on an overall score.
And two more questions.
Okay.
Can a candidate write down on a blank piece of paper given to them sample and OPQRST?
Yeah, that again, long as that, you know, that's not what they're not bringing it pre-programmed into the room. They're providing that information themselves. So yes.
Okay. And can you review again who helps the student in the EMT supine patient skill?
So in the supine patient skill, you have the EMT assistant who maintains the head and spinal immobilization, and then the evaluator and the candidate perform the log roll of the patient and placing the patient onto the long spine board.
Okay. All right, and that concludes the questions.
Okay. Okay, I'd like to thank everyone for their time today. I hope this provided you with some additional information that will help you with your evaluation of your candidates. And if you have any further questions, you can contact us at the National Registry. My phone number is area code 614-888-4484, and my extension is 129. So if you have any questions, you can follow up with us. I'd like to thank you, and everyone have a good day now.